Hello and welcome back. If you're unfamiliar with Southeast Asian cuisine, and with Filipino food in particular, you've probably never seen this before. This is bagoong, which I like to call an umami bomb. It's a fermented, heavily salted condiment, usually made from tiny shrimp or fish, and used in a wide variety of Filipino dishes. It can also be eaten as is, straight from the jar. In fact, one of my favorite ways to eat bagoong is as a dip for unripe green mangoes. It sounds weird and maybe a little gross, I know, but I think it's delicious. Used judiciously, bagoong adds a salty and extremely pungent earthiness similar to anchovies or fish sauce. And actually, the Filipino fish sauce called patis is made from bagoong brine. Growing up, my mother used a brand that was bright pink and the color of Pepto-Bismol. And yes, it was as off-putting as it sounds. I much prefer this deep, dark, sauteed version that's been spiked up with chilies. It's going to be the star ingredient in this week's dish, binagoongan. Binagoongan is not a subtle dish, so I'm going heavy on aromatics with 2 shallots, 7 cloves of garlic, and a couple of bay leaves. I'll just chop them up. Apologies to J. Kenji Lopez Alt for stealing his finger snapping transition. I will figure out my own transition for the next video. Notice that I left the garlic in fairly large slices. Garlic is a little funny in that it becomes spicier and more pronounced the finer you chop it. I'm already using spicy bagoong, so I don't need the garlic to be spicy as well. Also, I like seeing the slices of garlic in the finished dish. Next, I've got 160 ml coconut milk and 60 ml or a quarter cup of apple cider vinegar. I actually meant to use rice wine vinegar for this dish because it's slightly sweeter, but I only had the apple cider. It'll be fine. To make up the body of the sauce, I'll be using tomatoes. I bought this variety pack from the store. It's a little under 300 grams and has some really beautiful colors that'll add visual interest. You can definitely use just regular cherry tomatoes or even Romas. I'm going to have the bigger ones. The smaller ones are fine as they are. They'll pop in the pan as they cook. The remainder of the sauce will be made from 2 cups of chicken stock. This is an optional ingredient because you'd be perfectly fine to substitute plain water. That's how my mother made hers, and I'm not about to question her technique. However, I am going to take the opportunity to add some extra flavor. Next, there's the greenery. A lot of recipes call for eggplant to be the star vegetable of the dish, and I have no problem with that. I love eggplant, and if you want to use it, go right ahead. But for my version, I'm going to add green beans. This is mainly for texture, to add a little crunch to what would otherwise be a pretty soft dish. As for the jalapenos, they're there to lend some kick. I'm just going to chop them into rings, like so. And the beans, I don't have to do anything to them. I buy them in a bag already trimmed and washed. Although I do wash them again, just because. Otherwise, they're really convenient. And finally, I've got some boneless pork shoulder steaks, which I've cut into bite-sized cubes, about 1 centimeter to 1.5 centimeters thick. Again, a lot of recipes would have used pork belly instead, which is great if you enjoy biting into chunks of stewed pork fat and flabby skin. I prefer using pork shoulder, which has a nicer ratio of fat to meat. To prepare it, I make a dredge out of 2 tablespoons AP flour and 1 tablespoon rice flour, as well as some salt and pepper. I threw a little rice flour in there because it'll help with the browning and also protect the meat from absorbing excess oil. Believe me, there's going to be more than enough fat in the final dish. Alright, I'm ready to start cooking. First thing I gotta do is pop open the window and turn on the vent because it's gonna get stinky in here. Next, I make a little pool of veg oil in a hot wok, and I'm gonna add the pork and fry the cubes until they're about 75% cooked. That shouldn't take more than about 5 minutes. I'm also gonna fry in batches so that the oil doesn't plunge suddenly in temperature. The first batch looks like it's ready, so I'll pull it out, and in goes the rest of the pork, again for about 5 minutes. And just like that, second batch is done. Out that comes, and I'll just take a minute to drain the oil and clean up the pan a bit. After adding a little fresh oil, I'll throw in the shallots and garlic and give those about a minute to fry. I want them aromatic, not browned. Time to add the tomatoes. And the vinegar. And the bay leaves. I'm going to let this cook for about 10 minutes until the tomatoes are cooked down and the smaller ones that I kept whole start to crinkle and pop. Here I am 10 minutes later. Tomatoes are ready, so in goes the chicken stock. Or plain water, if you prefer. I'll bring this to a boil and let it go until reduced by about half. The sauce is reduced nicely, so I can add the coconut milk and the jalapenos. I'll also turn the heat down a little at this point because I don't want to vigorously boil the coconut milk. Doing so might curdle it. Alright, this dish is reaching its endgame. The only things left to do are to remove the bay leaves because those aren't edible. Then add the umami bomb. Bagoong. That's a heaped tablespoon I dropped in there. You can add way more, depending on your tolerance for funk. I've seen other cooks add 4 or more tablespoons, which just seems like an ungodly amount. I want to be able to taste everything else that's in the dish. Then I throw in the beans and return to meat. This now just needs to simmer for a final 5 minutes. And here it is, pork binagoongan. It's a little funky, a little meaty, a little spicy, a little sweet, a little salty, a little sour. The tomatoes add a nice fruity pop, the coconut milk adds silkiness, and the beans add texture. Overall, it's just a super delicious, super rich dish. Binagoongan is not for the faint-hearted, but if you're feeling adventurous, I definitely recommend you swing by your local Asian grocery store, pick up a jar of shrimp paste, and try it for yourself. As for me, I'm gonna add a couple of scoops of steamed rice to this aromatic umami bomb, take it to bed where my wife's already asleep, and eat it there. She's gonna love it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.